It is the first state of the game for 2021, and while we've talked about quite a few in the last, 9 or 10 that we've done, there's always more. And you can find the archive of all the broadcasts on YouTube, you can find the archive of the broadcasts on Twitch, and you can also find the latest episode as a podcast if you just search for DAoC State of the Game in your favorite podcast app. It's all you need to do. It's everywhere. It's got distribution on just about every single podcast app you can imagine. I think maybe all of them. So just DAoC State of the Game. So there's quite a bit to talk about. So let's go ahead and jump in and just look at what we've got currently for topics. So we're talking first about quality of life improvements and modernization of aspects of the game. Then we're going to talk about the disrespectful toxicity, how aware the community is that this is a video game. We're going to talk about the Wiki, and what the sort of consensus has been now amongst the community in terms of pulling all the information together into one place. Also, following topic, where should new players look for up-to-date information on the game? Massive difference between melee and caster when it comes to RPs earned. This is another, I don't think this is a holdover from last week. I'm pretty sure this is a new one. We've got some discussions about some bone answers, apparently. Why can't we damage Yama or IRC when they engage the BG? Are they cheating? No, we'll talk about that. The Santa gifts and the crashing that people were getting, and also, so we've got some things to talk about. We're also going to go through the board. This is the first time I've done this where I've actually gone through and looked at the forum. So we're going to go through the official forum as well. We'll also cover the latest bugs. We'll look at the Herald too. So we'll do all of those tonight on the state of the game, including talking about chat topics, which is maybe my favorite thing to do, is to go through towards the end and talk about the chat topics. So first things first, Extraterrestrial submitted a question, which is, when it comes to quality of life improvements and modernization of aspects of the game, what do you, I assume me, maybe the community, feel are the top priorities? Further built, UI customizations, UI overhaul, graphical overhaul, something else? Is this answer different when examining the game as long as player versus a new player or even a returning player coming from other MMOs? So quality of life improvements and modernization, there's a lot to go through. The first thing I think is probably some changes to the UI. That would be a small, although when I say small, I mean a small step when it comes to player base, much larger step for developers to take. I think there's quite a bit that needs to be done on the Herald as well. And they've been working, Broadsword has been working and developing a new Camelot Herald for quite some time. I'll talk about that briefly, and we can talk about graphics too. So the UI customizations, there are folks that are working on some third-party tools for UI scaling. Pronder, who's a community partner of this channel, the stream, Pronder's been doing some great work. He's got a link in chat. He's posted a ton of information about UI scaling, and is working on some pretty cool third-party tools that will enable you to do more. I think the best place to start is really Bob's UI, or there's a couple of other customized UIs that you can run. We should put those links in chat, and I'll put them in the show notes too. But that's really like the best way. If you're running the default UI, the best thing you can do right now, I think, just personal opinion, and maybe the opinion of quite a few out there, is to run a third-party UI. Bob's is a great example. There's a ton of customization that can be done, different maps that can be loaded in, and larger, smaller maps. There's only so much that a custom UI can get you right now, and that is essentially a rework of the existing client UI. And it is something that is on the radar of Broadsword. They have talked about making it a priority and working on it. It's not there yet. They've got quite a bit of other things to get through first. I think the first thing is probably the classic server. We'll talk about that at some point. The Camelot Herald is a work in progress. And my hope is that in the new Herald, they'll bring back things like Realm War Map. They will bring back character stats, maybe an updated builder, a spellcraft calculator, maybe a character planner, very similar to the Exidio character planner that exists. This is run by Venisra, has not been kept up to date. And my hope is that Venetia will come back and at least give somebody access to the backend to fix it, or we'll make a run through of the latest updates. This Exidio Herald is not cheap to run. I remember talking to Venetia when he first launched it. It is runs a very heavy SQL backend and is scraping the Herald, the official Herald, all the time for information. That's how this website is put together. He's been paying for it since he launched it 4 years ago. I think it was might have even been 5 years ago, 2015 or 2016. So we owe him a lot of thanks, and I wish he would take donations, but he doesn't. That's my hope for Camelot Herald. Just something that is more modern. The old Camelot Herald had an XML output where you could take real-time stats from the server, and you could build out your own Herald. You could build out your own Realm War map. A lot of people did that. I would love to see that come back too. And then a graphical overhaul, I think, is important, but maybe to me, the last on the list. I know many of you will disagree with me. I don't think the graphics engine is the first priority, especially with Greg, who's the artist, one of the artists at Broadsword, working on texture updates. I think there's probably not a whole lot that needs to be done other than maybe just some texture updates for now. Long term, of course, I'd love to see it moved to another graphics engine. But at the moment, Netimer/Gamebryo, I think is fine. You know, there's some underlying issues with the way things like pet pathing works. I'll get into that. Gear Bunny Classic has been a huge resource in helping me understand pet pathing in ways I did not before. I feel like every time I do a state of the game, every day I'm playing and interacting with you guys as a community, the more I learn. And last night I had a great chat with Gear Bunny Classic, who I hope will get to do we still have to schedule some, but I hope we'll get him on to do a special edition of the podcast and talk about templating. We'll bring some other folks on too. We've covered things like new player onboarding in previous state of the games. This kind of ties in with the wiki question that comes later. There needs to be a more involved player resource, a more detailed player resource for folks. And that, I think, might top everything else, is giving people the tools and the resources they need to learn the basic mechanics of the game, so that when they show up, right, they have an understanding of how it works. Or, you know, the tutorial zone is great. There's a lot that can be learned there, but even just getting into the game, right? Getting an account set up. Some of this may be on the Herald already, but getting an account set up, deciding what class you're going to play. A lot of people come from other MMOs. They don't, you know, they maybe like playing a damage class or a support class. Maybe they don't know exactly what class would best suit them. And I think there's an opportunity to improve the onboarding of new folks, the information that they get. Advertising's one thing. We've talked about advertising before as well. I don't know if advertising does us a whole bunch of good at this point until there are resources that are available for new players to come in. So that was ET's question. Thank you, aka Extraterrestrial, who's also a Patreon supporter. And all of this, by the way, is thanks to our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/ramicmedia, and of course our Twitch subscribers. aka Extraterrestrial in chat says, he has 6 outlined videos and 2 of them are scripted. I'm just working on the filming to set up resources for onboarding type stuff. It won't be official, but it'll exist at least. That's awesome. There are people in the community, like aka Extraterrestrial, that are working on content. And unfortunately, we lost one of those folks. I think it was about a month or 2 ago. Grobothier passed away, somebody who was instrumental in getting a lot of the content written and put together to be published on the Herald in conjunction with Beeb. They worked side by side and put a ton of stuff together. And Grobo was really the poster boy for much of the stuff on the Herald. A lot of the pictures were Grobo's characters. So the community suffered a huge loss with the passing of Grobo, but there are other folks in the community that are trying to fill in those shoes as best they can. And Gear Bunny Classic, right? A great example of somebody who's developing an app that is not native, that is not a Broadsword app. And even DAoC Utils and Hops, the work that Hops has done. But you could see the community's pulling together. I feel like even in the past couple of months, there's been a big push from folks in the community to develop these resources. I don't know what's behind it, but there is a huge push. And I'm so thankful that that's the case. We're going to move on to Oh, Gear Bunny Classic very quickly wants to say, let's not forget to thank Leladia, one of the original template makers, for getting us all to start making them. Next question and topic, at least that's been submitted here. I'd like to touch on, again, the idea of respect. Does the competition and player versus player model of Dark Age inherently breed the disrespectful toxicity in its player base? Comments like, God, those albs are just so stupid all the time, or I'd be embarrassed to be a mid, or the unceasing complaints about camping, cheating accusations, and the like are fairly common in Discord voice chats and in-game chat. Why is this the mentality of the player base, and what can we do as a community to make it a less toxic place, not just for ourselves, but for new and returning players? We're all guilty of being toxic. I think we can all share some blame for that at some point or another. Some of us more than others. I don't know what it takes to banish toxicity out of the game other than praising. Just learning to praise when you see good. I loved the Albs pushing tonight and what they did, to see them show up. The mids hit every tower, did not dodge a fight tonight. Thank you to the mids. To the Hibs that ran with me this evening, thank you for putting up with the constant death and destruction, although we did make a ton of RPs, but it seemed frustrating at times. I think more praise is what we need. And with more praise, I think comes less toxicity. There's always going to be this back and forth between different realms, right? These different factions, the enemy, the hatred that we have for those folks. It's not real hatred, I don't think. I hope not. I hope we're better than that as humans. Inevitably will be some level of competitiveness and I'm better than you when there are factions all fighting against one another. But we can all be less toxic. I'm going to take this opportunity very quickly to mention something that happened over the weekend to me that was really disheartening and was not a fun experience. I posted a video, I think last week on YouTube, and this is, I think, a moment to recognize that we all can learn from not just our mistakes, but even if we didn't make a mistake, learning how to do things better. So last week, I think it was, I posted a video that was titled IRC versus Oddballs. And I posted that to YouTube. I do these weekly recaps for Patreon subs where I go through multiple hours of content each week that's exclusive to Patreon subscribers at patreon.com/ramicmedia. But I break down all of the fights. I go through, I annotate them. I give my 2 cents about what happened, good or bad. And I don't usually throw people under the bus. I don't like to throw people under the bus, but it's an analysis. I'm not perfect at this, right? I'm not the best 8v8 player that's out there. People think I'm just a straight-out Zerger. That could not be further from the truth. But there are other people that could do this better than me, but I'm doing it. So I posted a 5-minute, 6-minute clip of what was IRC or Zoo's group versus Oddballs last week. And in it, I don't think I was toxic. I don't think I came after them. I thought I was fair in what I was seeing, which was that the tank group pushed on Yama and left the Tick and the Friar and the Sork wide open. It was the first time I had streamed with IRC, first time I'd streamed with Yama. There were a lot of people that were very upset that I was with Zoo. A lot of people that were upset that I was playing with Zoo that night. But I posted this video. And again, looking back on it, I probably could have angled it differently. But the goal of the video was to point out to everybody else in the game, not what Oddballs did wrong, because I think Oddballs, in reality, is a fantastic group, right? I think they're one of the better 8-mans in the game. It was more about how to kill Zoo and how to get that group, how to step up their game. Everybody to step up their game. Not Oddballs specifically, but everybody. You could make a video 5 times a night, 5 different videos a night of me making mistakes. I make mistakes. I point them out in the weekly recaps. But in this case, I wanted to take the opportunity, I thought, to show people that there was a different way. At some point on Saturday, there was a video posted by somebody in Oddballs in multiple Discord channels that was a personal attack on me. What I would consider cyberbullying, was theft of content from the channel, and was just like unbelievably inappropriate and wrong and sad. And I'm very disappointed in the people that created it and the people that shared it. It was immediately, well, not immediately, But it was taken down. It was taken down not because I am Ramek, but because it was a personal attack, and that doesn't stand. It was also struck from YouTube and struck from TikTok as well, where it was posted. There were copyright strikes on both. And I'm in the process of uploading all of my content to Content ID on YouTube so that that never happens again, because there was theft of content involved in there too. They took stuff right off the channel. Was their reaction, and again, this is on toxicity, was their reaction appropriate? Absolutely not. Could I have done better in my video and made them feel less attacked? Absolutely. Wasn't my intention. I defended them in Discord. But that video was just so over the top, childish, and it was really inappropriate, and it wasn't okay. And now, unfortunately, there's a rift on HIB over it. And now they won't run on HIB if I'm leading the BG. They've decided that they're not going to help us. They've been on mid now for the past 3 nights in a row. And that just makes me sad. Even after trying to resolve some of the things with Ace and with the folks in Oddballs, they had no interest in talking to me about it, or at least discussing it at length, other than expletives that were being shouted back at me. So, we can all be better. We can all be less toxic. And I think there are moments in the game where, or on stream, in Discord, where we say things like, oh, we say things that are inappropriate or toxic. They're not right. And we can all be better. That's all I can say about that. I don't really know what it's going to take, but I think praising and recognizing that we are all human and we all make mistakes is a great opportunity to learn from one another. And if a BG is dodging all night, I don't think it's inappropriate to say that they're dodging. If we're camping a tower, I don't think it's inappropriate to say, if we're really, like, if Hibs are really camping a tower, that we're camping a tower, like, why is that Hib BG camping? I think that's fair. I think it's fair to talk about Albs and Rescue not playing to the best of their ability, even though there are some really phenomenal Albs that unfortunately don't have the opportunity to fight every night. And Borgio in chat says there's a difference between intending to be toxic and saying something while the adrenaline is flowing. That's true. I still hope that we can all be better humans at the end of the day. It's okay that there's some competition. As Cyvic says in chat, DAoC will always have some form of competitive drama, but when it gets personal, that's not okay. Next thing. How aware is the community that this is a video game and that pixel death is not permanent? And what matters is fun? Do they know that losing a fight can also be fun? This was a topic that was submitted via the Google form. I've noticed it's getting better, at least on HIB, which is the primary realm that I play. That people are recognizing that death does not always mean complete failure or the desire to log out and just quit. There can be a lot of fun in fights that you don't win. There are RPs. Those push-pull fights that happen for 20, 30 minutes at a time, even when you die at the end of the night or at the end of the fight, are awesome. They are awesome. And the more you push out and the more you fight, the better you become. The more you engage, the more you die, if you're trying, the better player you become. This is true of any playstyle that's out there. This is true of soloers, smallies, 8-mans, Zerging, Zerg leaders. And as a Zerg leader, as somebody that leads an 8 or greater, I mean, maybe any guild leader, or any group leader, but certainly BG leaders, have a responsibility to the people in their BG to teach them that death is not always bad. Losing the fight over and over and over again, hopefully you're learning something from it and it makes you a better player. Logging out when you die is, I think, just giving up is the worst thing you can do, because you don't learn anything. You throw your arms up in frustration. Sometimes our first run tonight, a great example. Our first run tonight, if you watch the replay of the stream. Again, this is the stream on January 5th. It was a nightmare. We were not coordinated. I was not calling targets properly. My audio was messed up. I LD'd shortly after. It was really bad. But the HIB BG got better. We had some great fights. And I'm glad the folks who lost that first fight didn't immediately give up on everything else that was happening. Let's talk a little bit about, there are two questions here, 2 topics that I think go hand in hand. So first off, let me go to let's go to this wiki page first. So this is the fandom wiki. we have talked a lot in the past on this stream about resources. And the topic has come up about wikis, and it was my personal opinion that a wiki would be a great resource to compile content that the community can like add to and take away from. And it was my opinion that I really didn't think that this fandom site was all that good. It was out of date. It's owned by somebody else, which is really my biggest issue. My concern is that it trades hands and somebody just decides to stop supporting it. But Pronder and I had a conversation, and Pronder's been, reaching out to the community and talking to people at all different levels about this. And Pronder did some research into this, and it seems to be the best option at this point. I guess it's got the most content, the most information. It's owned by a company, this fandom company, which is, I guess, Wikia, or was previously Wikia. I think that's I'm saying that right. But it's a large company that's been around since 2006. So this is, I think, our place. And I would encourage everybody to go through and look at this wiki page and get all of the information. It's at camelotherald.fandom.com. Again, it'll be in the show notes. But you can add and take away from this. You can update content. Don't hesitate to get in there. A wiki's a great platform to get your hands dirty and really, write and take over pages that haven't been updated. All you have to do is create an account. So this is a great place to start. And the people who make videos, I think there should be a place for those videos too here. If the videos meet and this is anybody who makes videos, meet a certain level of like a quality standard, I think that Broadsword should share them. And we should compile an archive of these videos, because there are, for instance, on the Camelot Herald, there are videos and like these night podcast archives that exist. darkageofcamelot.com, up at the top under media, it's under night podcast archives. The last of these were in 2015, I think. Is that right? The last of these were in 2016. And none of them are edited, and they're sort of just recordings of streams. And there's information here that's great, but some of it's out of date, and I don't think it's at least chaptered in a way that people can easily navigate. So this is this is something that we can work on. And I would encourage, if Broadsword wants to open up that content for the community to edit, gives us sort of community rights to edit that content and piece it together into something that's worthwhile, that could also be actually quite fun too. That kind of goes into the next question, which is, where should players look for updated information on the game? It's really the Camelot Herald itself, darkageofcamelot.com, this wiki page, which is camelotherald.fandom.com. Those are really the two primary places, and also the official Discord channel, and this channel's Discord channel too. The official Discord link is on the Camelot Herald page at darkagecamelot.com. Our Discord link is in the show notes for every podcast, every YouTube video, and also constantly pops up in Twitch chat. And we have a phenomenal community of our own of people that are happy to build resources or to be able to help new players come into the game. Things like guilds, right? Guilds that are recruiting. We've started a page. I don't have the link to share, but our community has started this Google Docs project where we're putting together content and resources for this podcast that we'll do about onboarding people to the game and resources and stuff. And we're going to do a whole series on that. And it sounds like aka Extraterrestrial is also working on some content. There can never be too much of that. Why the massive difference between melee and caster when it comes to RP earned? Casters touch... that's a weird word, but casters affect more. They tend to do more damage than tanks do. right? They can reach more folks. The assist trains can go uninterrupted. It's not, I don't think necessarily that the kills are worth more. I think it's about the contribution to the kill, and casters just tend to get more RPs. Now, if it was a tank group versus another group and a caster group versus another group, I believe the RPs, I could be wrong about this. I don't think I am. The RPs would be the same, right? Like if you stack two groups up against one another, a caster group and a tank group versus another group, and assuming that other group wiped. But tanks just, they have their place in the game, and they're extraordinarily important, but they're on a single target at a time. And so tank groups, especially in Zergs, tanks don't always make, well, it really depends. But generally speaking, tank groups don't make a ton of RPs. In 8-mans, I think it's different. You'll notice that Legion, right, and there's a lot of tank groups on mid that don't always make the amount of RPs, even if the fights are even. They don't make as many RPs as the caster heavy Hib BG does, and it's because of their contribution. Punches Arex is mainly, I just notice it with bonuses when it comes to keep and tower fights. That's because tanks have a limited amount that they can do. They can't do barely anything ranged, right? And tanks there's just a different amount of contribution to kills in those fights. There are play styles. I think there are ways that you can play a tank that make you more effective in those situations, and we definitely need tanks. All three realms need tanks. Mids have a great tank presence during the US primetime BG, and it sounds like EU does as well, according to Borgio in chat. Although I could be reading that wrong. But this is the reason why I think most of the BGs have been, up until this point, caster heavy. And it's one of the reasons why Legion has done so well with his tank groups in the mid BG, is because they are going up against, especially in those close quarter fights where casters aren't so helpful, they're able to do quite a bit more in terms of the fight. They still don't hit as many people at once and do as much damage in mass, so they don't make as many RPs, but they're against a caster BG held up in a tower. Most of the time, the tank groups will do quite well. Next question, and we'll go over. We've got the forum to talk about. We've got some classic server stuff. We've got pathing. I'm going to talk about pet pathing in a minute, but I just want to get through these real quick. Revisiting Bone Dancers and Bone Army. I disagree with your statement that BDs are fine just because Perfect Crits is a good soloer. I made a comment. This was a topic that was submitted. I made a comment, I think it was in the last state of the game, that BDs have good representation across all different playstyles. I don't think I'm wrong about that. Pet pathing is an underlying issue in the game, and that's, I think, why BDs have such trouble. But that's in limited spaces, right? EV is a really bad place for pet pathing. There are, like, the bridges going in and out of EV are also not great for pet pathing. But if you've got your pets up, BDs, I think, are, and again, I could be wrong about this, but I think BDs are quite competitive. And you should submit your feedback. I don't have a ton of stuff to talk about in terms of BDs, but you should submit your feedback to Broadsword if you feel differently. And I promise you that I will come over on mid. I'll play Bone Dancer. And for those folks that want to show me up and tell me that BDs are actually not as good as I say they are, I'm excited to actually do that. The next question is, why can't we damage Yama or IRC when they engage the BG? Are they cheating? So the notion that you can't damage IRC because they're cheating is fundamentally just like not true at all. The group composition of IRC or the Zoo crew and some of these other highly competitive 8-mans are filled with high realm rank tunes and like the tick rank 5, right? There's a ton of they're able to stack things They understand the combination of items to use in ways that the general population does not. It's not cheating, but they're one of like the top tier groups. I think they are the top tier group in the game. And so they know how to work the mechanics of the game in ways that other people don't. When I talk about killing the zoo crew, if Zoo is on his tick, and I saw something about him maybe retiring his tick, but if there's a tick in that group, that tick and that rank 5 will make you think that you're not doing any damage to it, right? Yama is in the back, and you're wondering why your CC's never sticking to anybody. It's probably because the Friar has not been killed, because if Yama's in the backfield playing the backfield, the Friar's the primary demezzer. Maybe the Sword, but the Friar's really the primary demezzer. You have to really like push into that situation. You have to slow them down, and you have to pick your targets very carefully. Otherwise, they will run away. And Yama has sauce 5 with a cap duration on his temp. So it's well over a minute of sauce. And the only way you're going to get in there and slow them down is to warp them in the front. Or to potentially Zephyr them if you can get a Zephyr off in front instead of behind, because the Zephyr won't catch a sauce. Just try, or you could damage them while they're sauced. You have to get in front of them. But they're not cheating. They're not cheating. Let's talk, we're going to go and delve into some other stuff here real quick, but let's talk about the 12 Days of Christmas, which was a great event. It's still up. The merchants are still up for a few more days. You should go in, and if you're listening to this before, I think it's the 12th. Is that when the merchants go down? We have to go through the midwinter notes real quick and just look. But I'm fairly certain that it's January 12th is when the midwinter celebrations end, and I believe the merchants will go down on the 12th as well. So there were some hiccups with the 12 days, and I guess this is not the first year that this has happened, where if you claim all of the gifts at once, you have a tendency to crash. And I guess there are specific reasons as to why this is happening. And it was incredibly frustrating from my perspective that it wasn't working. We were under the impression that we could go and clear out vault space or inventory space as long as we had 29 spaces and do this on the last day. I tried for a little while. I crashed like 4 or 5 times and gave up. So it's really more about folks that rely on these 12-day gifts that come every single year to last them through the year. I've got a ton of resources at my disposal. There are a lot of players that don't necessarily need all of these items. And they are gifts, right? They're being handed out. But Broadsword is doing this, and I think there are a lot of people that rely on them. Are there suggestions from the community about how they can improve the process? I was thinking about the way in which they hand out veteran rewards. Why can't they put an NPC up that allows you to do them one by one, right? Wouldn't that be great, even if you waited until the last day? Because, you can then move things from. You don't have to clear out 29 spaces in your inventory at once. You can move stuff in and out of your vault. You can make trips back and forth. But there was some sort of bug that was causing people to crash, and I was not the only one that dealt with it, and it was frustrating. And I think this is, again, I might take some heat or some flack for saying this. I think Broadsword should put the NPC back up in the game, and I think they should leave it up for a little while for folks. People shouldn't get double gifts, but I think they should put the NPC back up for at least a few days or a week, right? It's not like people are going to get more than they asked for, because there isn't a way to rewrite the client, and at least as of now, and create more slots in inventory, or create more bank space, And a lot of these items, not a lot of them, but some of these items are limited, cannot be traded or dropped. So, you know, I'd like to see Broadsword fix that. That's just me. And maybe other people, I don't know. But I'd very much like to see Broadsword put the NPC back in. And just let people collect their you know, even if you don't fix the crashing, even if the crashing isn't fixed, at least give people an opportunity. And then maybe next year there's a different way to do it. I really like the idea of the veteran reward NPC, the way in which you can click through the years, and clicking through the 12 days would be great. So, Gear Bunny Classic says inventory has never had any expansion beyond houses. And Fueled says, I wish DAoC had a global vault system besides house vaults. Ikomedo says, I do wish that there was a way to expand vault space slightly. Vault is way full after midwinter. It is, it's just a limitation. It's a 20-year-old game. You know, is it anything is possible with the amount of time, resources, and energy? But Broadsword has, I think, chosen wisely to pick other things to develop, like the classic server, and to quash some of the bugs. Last thing, volley nerf on Scout. Scouts kill entire BG with volley. Why hasn't it been fixed? I've heard this complaint before, that volley is, you know, there are people that are volley assisting, and taking out large numbers of players with it. If you are coordinated enough to run a scout group of 8 that all volley on the same target, Rangers and Hunters also. Yeah, any archer class, right? Of course. Thank you. Disciple DM points out Rangers and Hunters get volley also. I should be more general when I say archers in general. If you're coordinated enough to run an 8-man of archers, you know, because I think it has a place for solo play, right? Archers being able to get in and do damage in situations that they otherwise might not be competitive. I think volley's fine. Reginald Black says, is the classic server going to have a rule set that you aren't allowed to macro? It would be nice to put in a bit more skill into the game rather than pressing a button and having most things done for you perfectly. So there's a difference between macro teams and macroing / scripting. Macro teams are not allowed in New Frontiers, but they are allowed everywhere else in the game. And only to veteran accounts, aka subbed accounts. Macroing, where you hit one button and multiple actions happen on one character at a time, has been allowed since the producer's letter, which was titled All About Cheating, which I think was back in 2016. People had been doing it and macroing for a very long time before then. And I don't know if it was heavily enforced, but there was a rule that you couldn't do it. And they clarified that in the producer's letter titled All About Cheating. I don't know what the right answer is to that. I don't know. I think that is above my pay grade as a Twitch commentator. I don't think it removes a ton of skill out of the game. I think that a lot of other MMOs have better systems in place to be able to fire multiple things at once. And macroing, at least when it comes to the game, Dark Age of Camelot, like the UA and the official, the live servers, I think is just a way to get around those sort of shortcomings that the client has. I don't know beyond that, but I don't see anything wrong with it because there are a lot of programs that you can use that are free to help you step up your game, and like Auto Hotkey, right, which is maybe a little bit more difficult to program on. Mojo is there. Mojo is a free program. There are other macro programs that exist out there. If you have an MMO mouse, which hopefully you're playing with something that has multiple buttons, even just taking advantage of keybinds. A lot of people think that macroing... I had this conversation with a fellow Hib the other day. They were complaining about keybinds and how keybinds are not fair. Keybinds are crucial, and learning how to keybind is crucial to being able to play your tune effectively. And I am still refining on all of my tunes to this day, my keybinds and macros and things. Do I think the classic server will ban macros, Reginald Black? I don't know. I don't know what Broadsword has planned for it. I would imagine that there is going to be some difference in rules. At some level, it might be really nuanced. It might just be macro teams aren't allowed at all, which would make a lot of sense because Classic servers in terms of progression are far different than the live servers, and it makes a lot more sense to have a macro team and a Classic server, which kind of defeats like it. They're very important. Macro teams play a very crucial role in the economy right now on Yuan, going into DF and doing raids that other people can't do, right? Being able to get bounty points, farming plat. Macro teams are very important, not in RVR, but to the game economy, they're very important, and they're almost required on Geharis in order to be able to perform. Yeah, I suspect at a very basic level that will change. Cybix says, I never understood why you can't use the consignment merchant as a bank and put plat on them for other characters to pull off. Also, the 200 plat max is way outdated. I would like to see mansion deeds be vaultable. I think that's just a pretty easy workaround, because you can already trade mansion deeds amongst players. Give people the ability to buy mansion deeds in their house from an NPC instead of having to go to a market, and be able to put them in the house, and that would be a very easy way of doing it. Because at this point, I've just got a bunch of mules that serve exactly the same purpose, and there's no real reason to not make them tradable. And I don't think there's a technical limitation that prevents them from being traded. Gear Buddy Classic talked the last state of the game and this state of the game, talked about why that there's a 200 plat cap in the game. It's because the game is a 32-bit program, and there's just not enough integers to be able to go be. I think it's 214 plat is the actual, like the theoretical cap, but 200 plat is the actual cap in game that they implemented, because again, it's a 32-bit program. DAoC NJ says, first time here, I haven't played in a long time. How's the solo stealth game nowadays? I think the solo stealth game is probably quite a bit different than it was 2 or 3 years ago. There are more stealth groups than there were 3-4 years ago. Stealth groups and stealth zergs have become far more common than they were before. There are a lot of RPs to be made all the time. Let's talk about pet pathing. We're going to go to pet pathing. I had a great conversation with Gear Bunny Classic about pet pathing and doing some research and just trying to understand exactly what the issue is. And so I think I have a better understanding now than I did before as to why there's a problem. All of, or almost all, of the zones rely on pathing from what is the classic era, right? The classic terrain, if you will, and the classic structure of the game. During the Catacombs release, it was largely a visual upgrade in which Catacombs textures and structures were put on top and overlaid on top of essentially classic areas. DAoC relies on a system, as far as I've been told and can tell, relies on a pathing system called Pathfinder. And that essentially looks for the most direct point for mobs and pets to go from point A to point B. And if it can't make that direct point, it will generate a path that will get from point A to point B if it can't take the most direct path, which is straight. Pathing is think of it as like a mesh, if you will. If there are holes in the mesh, the pets don't know where to go, or they fall through. And on some of the, in New Frontiers, right, specifically, there is no classic mesh underneath. It is all new. But it would require, from what I understand, Broadsword to do a significant amount of work to go in and fill a lot of those holes in that have been created over the course of time in Frontiers. So it is something that can be resolved, but I don't know if it's easy enough to resolve based on the amount of resources that it would take to do it. This is why there are some weird, just some weird bugs with things like structures, right, that have existed for a very long time in the game. There are geometry errors, places that you can go in that you shouldn't, right? We're not going to go into where those are, but those are most of the time related to this sort of layering where the Catacombs era was laid on top, or the Catacombs graphics and structures were laid on top of Classic. So anyway, pathing is something that, from what I understand, again, it can be fixed. Pathing can, in fact, be fixed. But, will it be is just a matter of time. Gear Bunny Classic clarifies, it says essentially it's 2 maps layered on top of each other. And that's the fundamental issue with pathing. And so it requires a rework, and it requires some work on the Pathfinder system, or at least in terms of these maps and this meshing for these holes to be filled in. Foxy Red says, when will we be able to play the Classic server? The Classic server is coming. It was due in 2020. I think a lot of things outside of Broadsword's control happened in 2020. The patch fixes, COVID. I mean, there were a lot of things that occurred that made 2020 a very difficult year. Last year, about this time, I think it was about 13 months ago, a little over a year ago, they talked about this at length, and what their plans were. And they wanted very badly to get this out in 2020, and they just didn't have the time. They didn't have just too much stuff going on. So they're working on it right now. And while we don't have an updated ETA, my guess, just speculation, personal guess, would be it'll be in the next 5 or 6 months. I can't imagine it would go. I can't imagine it going that much further. That would be a major deviation from the timeline. And I just don't see. I can't imagine why that would happen. Gret Live says, someone brought up Warhammer the other day in terms of a classic server. How War is doing better now than ever before with a solid conservative progression standpoint. Thoughts? For sure, there's a difference between what DAoC used to be and what DAoC is today. And people can, there are people that loved the grind and loved the progression and the challenge and the amount of time and effort it took into getting from point A to point B in the game, or just leveling up your toon, or, earning RPs, etc. And it's different now because the population is at a point where there's still a ton of fights. There's no reason not to come back to the game. The game is in a great position right now. And anybody that tells you otherwise is misleading you, because either they've had a bad experience or they're trying to promote a free shard. It's a different, with the population the way it is right now, there's not enough people to support the amount of grind that it would require to go back. And there's a dedicated fan base of people that really enjoy that. And we can tell just based on some of the populations that were at least on some of the shards that were classic. So I do think it will be extraordinarily popular, and I think it will draw not only people from of days past, players that haven't been in the game for 10, 15 years-ish, maybe more, and also people that are currently playing but elsewhere that need to come back to the live servers, that should come back to the live servers. Ollie, great reminder by Ollie in chat. She says, guys, remember Ramic does not work for Broadsword. He can give you his thoughts, guesses, etc., but until we know for sure, we don't have all the details. I am not a Broadsword employee. I'm not paid or sponsored by Broadsword. And so you can ask me all the questions. I will give you speculation. In some cases, I know, I can put pieces together in my mind of things that are happening. I might know some information and I can kind of elaborate on it, but I am not a Broadsword employee, and I just simply don't have all the answers. We have a community full of people that know different pieces of the puzzle. And I think it's a matter, this state of the game is a great opportunity to put all of those puzzle pieces together. Fueled says, do you think that RPs need to be adjusted for solo kills as well as gold? That's a kind of a loaded question. I think that solo kills are highly profitable. The problem is that there's not enough solo kills occurring, right? I don't think RPs are the issue. How many RPs that are rewarded? I really don't think that's the problem for soloers. What I think the problem is just about the sheer number of kills and the amount of solo action there is. No, I don't think that soloers need to get a bump. I just think, well, maybe they do in light of the fact that it's not always easy to make RPs because there's not always people to kill. But in a world in which there's so much solo action like there is 8v8 and Zerging, I think the RPs that are awarded are fine. It might be just as simple to try and figure out a way in which to get people. I keep talking about this, these dynamic objective events and these dynamic events that occur. The Doppels in the maze, even when they were part of that seasonal event, in which provided soloers a ton of kills. So I don't think RPs are wrong for soloers. I think that either you bring people together to fight, population, of course, increases over the course of time. I think that's really the issue. But for now, you've got, there's the lone wolf buff that you can get. You can run a 50% pot. You can run bug. I don't think you can stack all three of them at the same time, but lone wolf is free, and I believe that does stack with bug. I think it's just, I think events can solve some of these problems, some of the shortcomings for RP earners for solars. AK Extraterrestrial says, I'm always shocked that EA hasn't brought their hefty cease and desist hammer to bear. I talked about this. I'm not going to go through that again, but I talked about this extensively in the last State of the Game. Do I think that there will be some sort of action from EA? I don't know. But there's a greater reason. There's a greater chance of that happening after they launch the Classic server, I think, than there is before. Formulas 23 asks, can I ask how long you've been playing DAoC? Since day -40 or 50. I was part of the beta. I took a few years off in the mid-2000s, but I played. I just was like in and out. I wasn't. And there have been years where I've been more active. Like I've played, like now I play 5 nights a week. There have been years that I've played 3 nights a week. I've been around a while. Enough to go from no facial hair to a beard and having a full head of hair to not having a full head of hair. I've been doing this for a long time. It doesn't mean that I am the expert on all things DAoC by any stretch. I'm learning things every day, and there are a lot of people in this community, a lot of people that are way smarter than I am. If there's one thing I think I've been good at, maybe, is pulling people together and building a community. And so I am forever grateful for the people that have watched the Twitch stream, that are Patreon supporters, that have entered the giveaways, that tolerate me streaming while running in the BG, the folks that I've run with for years, even before I was a streamer. And really, a lot of that credit goes to you guys and how awesome you've been in following me and being a part of this and contributing, and to the mods and everybody else. Okay, I digress. Let's go to the boards real quick. Let's look through how hard is a return. RP Grandpa says, how hard would a return be for somebody who's been away from the game for 10 plus years? How would it be to get a good template done without having tons of platinum, no guild? Someone told me that you damn near had to have a master's degree to figure out how to do these new templates. I'll give you my 10 cents about it. I don't think it's super hard to come back to the game. I think it's kind of like learning how to ride a bike again. There are a lot of good examples of templates that people would be willing to share. It depends on the class. You are not alone. I think the biggest thing I would hammer home to folks that are coming back to the game, that are trying to build templates, is that first off, there are tools available like Gear Bunny Fusion. Before you even dive into that though, you should get that program, but you should be talking to people in the community who have built templates over the course of time. You should be looking at existing templates to kind of get an idea of what the crucial items are for the class that you play, and also maybe the play style, right? The kind of play that you want to get into with that class, because that also can vary the template and the items wildly from one to the other. I don't think it's super difficult, but I think you have to reach out and ask. Being a part of the official Discord is important. Joining a guild is important of veteran players. Advanced evade for assassins. This should be on a practitioner says this should be on assassins, especially since no ignore pain anymore. We're just gonna skip right over that one. Crescendo, Cloak of the Loyal Bard, 225% speed. Fate Boy writes, I think it's time that the CL15 Cloak of the Loyal Bard gets adjusted for the self-crescendo. Both the mid and the alb get crescendo that is limited to 135 after being nerfed a few times. I believe in the name of balance, it's time that the cloak comes down from 225. So, a couple things that you have to remember. First off, I believe both of the realms, the other realms, get insta-crescendo, where bards do not. Maybe Scalds don't get insta-crescendo, it's castable. Minstrels get insta-crescendo that does not require a cloak, that's built into the class. So bards are at a bit of a disadvantage already because of the fact that it's castable crescendo. It's still usable, but it's not quite as easy as a minstrel's is to be able to Wilson out, either get a player out of harm's way or get them into a fight. I don't agree with the idea that you should be nerfing that. You really don't want to dive into that, because you start removing things like the insta crescendo that the bard has and requires a level 10 loyalty cloak. How does that balance out with minstrels and scalds? They don't have the bards have more utility in terms of heals, but do not have the same kind of damage table that Scalds do, and do not have the kind of like being able to charm pets and things like climb, right, that minstrels do. Again, this is all available from the DarkAgeOfCamelot.com homepage. On the right-hand side, there's an item database, there's a character and guild search, the official forums, bug tracker, and then a merch store, which I have some. If you look right behind me, you'll see that little tree. That is a tree coaster that I got from the official merch store. It's not a plug, although I guess it might be, but they have a store on Zazzle, and there's all sorts of really cool stuff. I have a little magnet, DAoC magnet in my PC. There's all sorts of cool stuff on the Dark Age of Camelot website. Thanks to Siambra and to Pronder for being Beard Crew members. That's the highest level of support. To Borgio and to Beeb for being Tier 3 It's Not Over members on Patreon. To Bellamar and MacPherson for being Tier 2 Saving the Game. And to AK Extraterrestrial, God's Demon, Neo Matrix, Ollie, Keed, Veneer, Violin, and Bloodcore. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, be safe, wear a mask, take care of everybody around you. Ciao.